التغيير ليس مستغربا.
لا عم بصير 7 أياد بشكل آخر.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's headlines. Head of the Syndicate Coordination Committee, Hanna Gharib, calls for more protests this week if Parliament remains unable to endorse the public sector's salary increase. Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi says security incidents in Tripoli are finally over and that preparations for rehabilitating the northern city are underway. And foreign ministers of major refugee-hosting countries attend a one-day meeting in the Zatari refugee camp in Jordan to discuss a resolution for the Syrian refugee crisis. Head of the Syndicate Coordination Committee, Hanna Gharib, has called for more protests this week if Parliament remains unable to endorse the public sector's salary increase. His comments came during a celebration for the Communist Party in the Bekaa Valley this morning. Gharib called on all unions to unite against the whales of money and says the people must be confident that they are able to make a change. Lebanon has witnessed several protests calling for a 121% wage hike for civil servants and public teachers. Parliament has been reluctant to endorse the bill, arguing that it needs time to find resources to fund the scale, estimated to cost more than $1.4 billion. MP Nabil Defrej told reporters that the discussion on raising the value-added tax was left for MPs over differences among the committee's members. Kataeb Party leader Amin Jmail says his candidacy for the presidency will only become valid if lawmakers fail to elect Lebanese Forces Chief Samir Jaja, revealing his ambition to become a consensual candidate. The former president expected the third round of polls next Wednesday to be decisive in the battle for the country's top Christian post. He stated the polls have turned into a conflict between Jaja and Free Patriotic Movement chief Michel Aoun, but things will change when Lebanon feels that the election of one of them is impossible, he says. Jmail told reporters that he aspires to become a consensual president, but his aspiration is not enough to make it a reality. Addressing both Jaja and Aoun, Jmail said, "We should cooperate to serve the nation and not a certain party, as the elections shouldn't further cause divisions among rival parties." Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi says the turmoil in Tripoli has ended for good and that preparations for rehabilitating the northern city were underway. Rifi's comments came as he met with a delegation from the Tripoli Port Workers Syndicate. He says, "We are now getting ready to rehabilitate Tripoli and prove that it is a city of stability, peace, coexistence, moderation and tolerance." Rifi added that former Prime Minister Fouad Sanyura had held several meetings to follow up on the issue of forming a private economic zone in Tripoli and that the mechanism for the operation of such zone will soon be ready. The minister, who hails from the northern city, says the aim to the plan was to ensure growth and create employment opportunities in the city, one of Lebanon's poorest cities. Maronite Patriarch Bshara Rahi has celebrated Mass at the Roman Catholic pilgrimage site of Lourdes in France on the occasion of the international pilgrimage of the Order of Malta. The Order of Malta's members and volunteers from all over the world travel each year to Lourdes during the first weekend of May. They accompany the sick and disabled and pray and bathe in the holy waters. Around 200 Lebanese, among them 24 sick people, took part in the 5-day pilgrimage and attended today's Mass. The 2014 international pilgrimage was attended by 25,000 faithful from all over the world. The Patriarch, who is also a cardinal, celebrated the Mass in French, but the Bible was read in Arabic, the first time such a move has been made in the annual Mass. Rahi says he prayed the Virgin Mary will salvage the Orient, plunged in turmoil. Lourdes attracts millions of visitors each year. The Catholic Church recognizes 68 miracles linked to it, and many disabled or sick people go there to pray for a cure. It has a famous grotto where the Virgin Mary appeared to Bernadette Soubariou, a peasant girl, in 1858, and whose water many believe has curative powers. Thousands of women have taken part in the women's race organized by the Beirut Marathon Association for the second year under the slogan "Run Forward." The race was divided into a 10-kilometer women's challenge and a 5-kilometer run for a cause in which men also took part. The BMA says the aim of the race is to inspire positive change and promote wellness for all Lebanese women of all generations and backgrounds. This year, the Run Forward slogan aims at promoting women's rights issues in Lebanon, a matter of great debate in the country. This year's winner was an Ethiopian runner named Aregu Sisay Abate, who came in third last year's race. She completed the 10-kilometer race in 41 minutes. The track of the race began on the Beirut waterfront, and runners raced through different neighborhoods of the capital, where traffic had been closed for a few hours to give way to the runners. Second place winner was Lebanese Sonia Hanna. Foreign ministers of major refugee-hosting countries have attended a one-day meeting in the Zaatari refugee camp to discuss a resolution for the Syrian refugee crisis. The meeting, the third for countries harboring the largest number of Syrian refugees, brought together foreign ministers from Jordan, Lebanon, Egypt, Turkey and Iraq, along with the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres, with the aim of discussing the struggles facing host countries in the region. The ministers affirmed the importance of continued international support for the refugees and their host communities, as well as the dire need for increased international support. Jordan is one of Syria's 4 immediate neighbors, and along with Lebanon, Turkey and Iraq, was inundated with refugees fleeing the ongoing civil war. Jordan now hosts close to 600,000 Syrian refugees. A large number of those who seek refuge in Jordan are transported to Zaatari, which is home to around 130,000 Syrian refugees. Syrian rebels have reached a deal with the government for the withdrawal of opposition fighters, civilians and wounded people from the city of Homs, where they have been under siege for 2 years. Elsewhere in the country, Syria's army made major advances in Leha, a town strategically located southeast of Damascus near the airport road. A security official says more than half of the town is under army control. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights also reported the advance, but the head of the monitoring group says it was unclear how firmly in control the army was. Observatory Director Rami Abdulrahman said regime troops have reached the town center and Hezbollah is playing the lead role in the battle. Like the rest of the eastern Ghouta area, Leha has been under siege for a year and under a fierce bombardment campaign for weeks. Syrian President Bashar al-Assad is to face challengers in Syria's June 3rd presidential election, which he is assured of winning. The candidates are mostly unknown to the public. The Constitutional Court says 23 candidates had initially registered to run against Assad, but most did not meet election criteria to run for office, in a vote that has been mocked by the opposition and the West as a farce. Coming up next, pro-Russian separatists in the rebel stronghold of Sloviansk continue to occupy the town. More after the break. Welcome back. Pro-Russian separatists in the rebel stronghold of Sloviansk continue to occupy the town, despite Kiev's offensive on Friday aimed at retaking the eastern town. Ukrainian officials have launched an anti-terrorist operation in early April, but have resisted large-scale measures so far. The rebels, who demand a referendum on independence for at least 2 eastern regions on May the 11th, have seized official buildings in major centers and small towns across the Donbass, often with little or no opposition from local police. Hundreds of pro-Russian protesters in the eastern city of Donetsk stormed the governor's business premises and the state security headquarters on Saturday. The pro-Russia activists have called the rally to protest the loss of more than 30 lives in the southern port city of Odessa, where groups of Ukrainian nationalists clashed with anti-government protesters. And now for news around the world in brief. 8 groups are trying to reach survivors of a landslide in northern Afghanistan that buried a village, killing hundreds of people and leaving 700 families homeless in the mountains. Supplies began arriving as the 8 groups struggled to reach the village via poor mud roads that were unable to take heavy vehicles. Much of Aib Barik village in Badakhshan province was destroyed on Friday by a fast-moving tide of mud and rock that swept down the hillside and left almost no trace of 300 homes. Yemen's Al-Qaeda branch says one of its local commanders has died from wounds he suffered during an attack by the Yemeni army and U.S. drones. The Defense Ministry also says that Yemen's army has killed 37 Al-Qaeda suspects and wounded dozens as part of a major offensive launched in the south of the country last week. 2 explosions in Kenya's port city of Mombasa have killed at least 3 people and injured several others. Kenya's Interior Ministry says a grenade was thrown into a crowd near a bus stop. Sources say another blast occurred at the Reef Hotel, a beachside tourist resort in the Nayara area of the city. U.S. President Barack Obama has poked fun at himself and what he called a hard year, but aimed his most caustic humor at Washington gridlock when the political and media elites gathered at the annual White House Correspondents Association dinner last night. More than 2,000 guests packed the ballroom of the Washington Hilton, where the capital's political and media worlds collide every year in lubricated goodwill punctuated by a long dash of glamour on loan from Hollywood.
Last year was rough. Sheesh. At one point, things got so bad, the 47% called Mitt Romney to apologize. Of course, we rolled out healthcare.gov. That could have gone better. In 2008, my slogan was, "Yes, we can." In 2013, my slogan was, "Control, Alt, Delete." A wonderful story. An American won the Boston Marathon for the first time in 30 years. Which was inspiring, and only fair since a Kenyan has been president for the last 6. Anyway, this year I've promised to use more executive actions to get things done without Congress. My critics call this the imperial presidency. Truth is, I just show up every day at my office and do my job. You got a picture of this, I think. You would think they'd appreciate a more assertive approach, considering that the new conservative darling is none other than Vladimir Putin. Last year, Pat Buchanan said Putin's headed straight for the Nobel Peace Prize. He said this. Now, I know it sounds crazy, but to be fair, they give those to just about anybody these days. So it could happen. But it's not just Pat. Rudy Giuliani said, Putin is what you call a leader. Mike Huckabee and Sean Hannity keep talking about his bare chest, which is kind of weird. Look it up. They talk about it a lot. It is strange to think that I have just 2.5 years left in this office. Everywhere I look, there are reminders that I only hold this job temporarily.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Head of the Syndicate Coordination Committee, Hanna Gharib, calls for more protests this week if Parliament remains unable to endorse the public sector's salary increase. Justice Minister Ashraf Rifi says security incidents in Tripoli are finally over and that preparations for rehabilitating the northern city are underway. And foreign ministers of major refugee-hosting countries attend a one-day meeting in the Zatari refugee camp in Jordan to discuss a resolution for the Syrian refugee crisis. Those are your Sunday headlines from us here at Future Television. I'm Linda Tamim, wishing you all a very nice evening.
الغياب ليس مستغربا.
لا عم بصير 7 أياد بشكل آخر.